and this was in a blinded randomized trial, that these patients with type 2 diabetes had a significant reduction in blood glucose. Even though I don't have type 2 diabetes, I sort of subscribe to the idea that everybody benefits from lower blood glucose, including those without diabetes. So that's a probiotic that I take. I don't have any involvement with the company. The company's called Pendulum, but I take their glucose control probiotic.
Can you walk us through a bit on glucose control? Because I think that's still an area that, for people who are not as well informed, that's an area that I learned about probably in the last year and a half that has changed what I eat first thing in the morning. It's changed what I'm eating at different times. Like, to me, I was just like, oh, if I need a boost of something, as long as it's a healthy sugar, it's fine. Not only to realize that, causing spikes in my blood glucose level. So could you walk us through that a little bit?
Glucose is this essential, very simple carbohydrate. It's kind of the final common pathway of most carbohydrates. There are other simple carbohydrates as well, fructose being one of them. So sugar, for example, table sugar is a molecule of fructose and a molecule of glucose. But glucose is the most abundant carbohydrate final breakdown product, and it's very highly regulated. At any point in time, you're walking around with, if you haven't eaten that day, somewhere between 4 and 5 grams of glucose in your blood. Maybe say 4 to 6 grams of glucose in your blood, which is just over a tablespoon, or a teaspoon rather. So tiny, tiny amount. But you're using it constantly, and therefore your liver is constantly putting more out into your circulation ever so delicately. And the balance of that is so fine that if that level were to be just twice as much, if you were to go from 1 teaspoon to 2 teaspoons, that would be consistent with having type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes is a condition where an individual can't control the amount of glucose in their blood. This is very problematic because glucose, when it becomes too high, starts sticking to proteins, and it starts causing damage all over the place, but primarily to small blood vessels. So blood vessels in the heart, blood vessels in the kidney, in the brain. If you're in the extremities of the toes, that's why people with type 2 diabetes are more susceptible to amputations, kidney disease, heart disease, strokes, Alzheimer's disease, all of these things. Anything that compromises blood flow and oxygen. So it turns out that even if you don't have type 2 diabetes, and that today is just defined by a threshold of average blood glucose above 140 milligrams per deciliter, even if you are not in that category, it still appears that your mortality goes down the lower your average blood glucose. So meaning within the normal range of glucose, lower is still better. People sometimes say, well, does that just mean, you should never eat a food that raises blood glucose? No, that doesn't necessarily mean that at all. What it means is you need to be mindful of matching your glucose consumption to your capacity to dispose of glucose. And those are factors that are, of course, highly impacted by how much you sleep. So interruptions in sleep dramatically reduce your capacity to put glucose into your muscles, which means glucose levels get higher. It also has to do significantly with how much you exercise and how much muscle mass you have. So people can have completely different tolerances for glucose. And I think I write quite a bit about this, which is, basically trying to understand your glucose tolerance level comes down to matching it with your insulin sensitivity, muscle mass, activity levels, sleep, stress, et cetera.